does this come as a surprise to you, the timing of it with 2 games to go?
I think the timing of it probably doesn't come as a surprise. We knew something's coming. It's almost like one of those things where I think for Ivan and for us as Brentford fans and everyone and the club, it's almost like we want to try and put it out of your misery. We knew that something was coming. Obviously he didn't get the England call up earlier on, and then he didn't get the World Cup, then he got the call up later, and we're thinking, okay, what's that happen now? Can we just get the ban out of the way and just move on from that? So it's almost like 2 games before the end of the season. We're kind of relieved because we thought, okay, if he gets banned in August, he could be out for the whole of next season. So for us as fans, obviously we want him to play as much as possible. We're not condoning anything that he's done, but he's got to get the fine, he's got to get the ban and move it on. So in a way, I'm glad it's done.
Have you got any? Are you a bit worried at all about next season having to start without him?
I think there is a concern. I mean, like I said to you, I've got the Beesotted podcast. We've got it Pride of West London. We're part of the talkSPORT fan network, as you probably know. And we're actually recording this evening now. So obviously we've got a very hot topic to talk about. And one of the subjects we're talking about is obviously kind of like who's going to lead us in for the first, half of next season. Interestingly, Ivan Toney was actually out on Saturday. We played a game against West Ham on Sunday. Actually, we played a game against West Ham and he had a slight hamstring problem. I'm not sure whether or not the hamstring problem, again, I'm just asking the question whether or not it's actually trying to prep us up for getting our players used to playing without Ivan Toney. But we played with Wissa up front, and we also had Sharda, and we had Mbuma as well. And actually, they flipped it up. And Brentford's style of football was very different with these 3 players as it is to Ivan Toney, because we play a particular way with Ivan. So I think that Brentford, in a way, they're thinking this is great. We've got 2 games, which at the end of the day, if we lose both the games, it doesn't really matter, to try and gear ourselves up. We've got a whole summer to bring somebody else in if we need to. And then after that, we need to be up and running by the first game of next season. So there is a concern. Of course, there definitely is for somebody who scores 20 plus goals. But Brentford always seem to pull something out of the bag.
Listen, this ban for 8 months runs up to and including the 16th of Jan next year. Do you think with that in mind, it makes it less likely, more likely, or makes no difference to his future at your club?
I think it makes absolutely no difference to his future at the club. Well, in a way, I think also the fear that we had is that as fans, we don't want our players to leave. We don't want no one to leave. But from an economic sense, obviously, Brentford are a team that when a player gets to a certain value, they'll move on. And we know that. And we've learned that over the years, and we've learned to get used to it. So we're already bracing. I mean, we know David Raya is going to go soon. We know Ivan Toney's going to go fairly soon. So for me, the concern was Ivan Toney's going to go this summer. We'll have to gear ourselves up. But at least we know that he's going to be there at least until next January. So I think that's going to be the case. But also the other thing that we're talking about is that if he's out for 8 months, and this is something that he has done himself, technically, we would love to think that Brentford would be able to negotiate at least another year extension on his contract, because his contract's up for renewal in 18 months' time. And I think that's important for him to give something back to us and back to the club who has backed him through this whole process.
Yeah, they certainly have. I mean, would you, and this is obviously your opinion, would you even think about maybe cashing in on him in the summer and replacing him with a lump sum of money? Or do you think, no, keep him at the club and try and convince him to maybe sign another year?
Me personally, I would like to convince. I think Ivan Toney, we've come from, the lower regions with Ivan, and we've worked together and we've grown together, and he knows what the club's done for us. The club's very well known for taking care of its people all the time, and I think that the players, the managers, everybody else have also got to kind of give back to the club. So I think at this stage now, Ivan's got to go. Tell you something, I know that I might have a move on to go X, Y, and Z, but Brentford have been good to me. I've lost them 8 months. I'll give them another year, and then we move on from there, because it's almost like this season has been like a big stepping stone for him. And we told everybody he's going to get there, and we've kind of helped him to get that stage. He's helped us to get that stage, and I think he needs to work together with us to get us to the next level.
Billy, let me ask, going back to something you just touched on, you said that with regards to his future at the club and the extension, etc., that the club has backed him. So by saying that, I assume you feel he owes the club. Is that right?
I think that, again, you say he owes the club. I think so.
Can I ask, why has the club backed him? So I'm a great believer, as you are, and of course you're innocent until proven guilty. So until this ban came out, there's no reason why the club wouldn't keep playing him every week. Why do you think the club has backed him? By doing what?
Okay, I think the club has backed him because they know more about the situation than we even do. At the end of the day, again, I'm not condoning anything. If you speak to any of the fans, like I said to you, go to Pride of West London on our podcast, we talk about it and say, if you do the crime, you got to deal with it. And I think the club knows that as well. But at the end of the day, you can't chastise somebody forever. He's done the crime. He's now got the ban, but as a club, they've got to look at, say, okay, how can we still develop you as a footballer, even though something that you've done is wrong? If he'd come to them and said to them, listen, I'm going to bet 200 and X times, they would have said to him, no, do it. No, don't do it. But he's done it in his own time. So he's made a massive mistake. But the club, to be fair to them, have gone, right, okay, you've made a mistake. But now what we're going to do is that we're not going to throw you to the wolves. We're going to help you to move on from that, but you still need to do the time.
Sorry, just a quick one as well. You said about throwing him to the wolves, but you've got to think, because it's Ivan Toney, the club was never going to do that, were they? If it was maybe a lesser player, they might have thrown him to the wolves because there's no value in that player. But because it's Ivan Toney, arguably he's your best player, they were never going to just throw him to the wolves.
I don't think that any club would do that with any player, would they?
They would.
Again, I know Brentford very well, and I don't believe that they would have thrown any player to the wolves.
What do you think that does mentally for him? How does it affect him? And also, what does it do to the club? Because they've got a chance of getting European football this year.
I'll start off with what it does to Ivan Toney, and I think this is obviously a huge blow to his career. He's 27 years old. He just made his England debut in March against Ukraine. He's probably at the peak of his powers. He's the third highest top goal scorer in the Premier League this season, only behind Erling Haaland and Harry Kane. And that's for a player who's come up from League One and the Championship to make it to the top flight. So I'm sure lots of, clubs bigger than Brentford, and that's no disrespect to Brentford, would have been potentially taking a look at him this summer if he didn't have this 8-month ban hanging over him. So he probably would have been in a situation where he's potentially moving to a top 4 club, top 6 club, in a chance with competing in the Champions League next season. And all that's going to be stripped away. As you said, Brentford themselves are kind of competing for Europe this season. I mean, results would really have to go into their favour. So I think it would have been unlikely, even with him, if they would have snuck into the European places. But for the club, they've just secured safety in their second season in the Premier League. They've been absolutely flying. And Ivan Toney's been a huge part of that. He's been phenomenal. I talk about the 20 goals, but we drill it down into some of those individual performances. He bullied William Saliba and Gabriel when Brentford played Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium in February. He scored those 2 fantastic goals against Manchester City in November, and I think he could have had a hat-trick that game. So Brentford are going to really, really miss him. I think they've already made some moves to kind of mitigate his loss. Whether that was intentional or not, we'll never know. But it's a real disappointment for Toney, and it's a real disappointment for Brentford as well.
Do you think Brentford can cope without him next season, certainly at the start of next season?
I do, actually. The couple of games they played this season without Ivan Toney, I actually think they're undefeated. They beat West Ham 2-0 at the weekend. Ivan Toney was missing with a hamstring injury. They beat Liverpool 3-1 back in January. Ivan Toney was missing that game. I think it was with a back injury. But as I kind of alluded to, Brentford signed a young German forward in January called Kevin Schade, and anybody who's watched him can tell he's quite a raw talent. I'm not about to say Schade's going to replace Ivan Toney's 20 goals. That would be ridiculous. But he's someone who was brought in to play with Ivan Toney. He can play on the wing, but he can also play centrally. So I think by signing Schade, it's on loan for now, but with an obligation to buy. So it's pretty much a done deal. By almost getting Schade in 6 months early, they've allowed him to adapt to the league. And then from next season, I think we'd expect to see much better output than him. Johan Visser, he's just signed a new contract at the club. He's popped in with some crucial goals this season. Same with Brian and Mbeumo. You've got Keane Lewis-Potter, who was, one of the best talents in the Championship last season. Now, he's been a little bit unlucky with injury this year, but I'm sure Brentford are hoping he'll kick on next season. So they've got options, of course. They'll be looking this summer at some sort of replacement. I have no doubt about that. But for now, I don't think they need to quite hit the panic button. And I should add, we've seen in the past, Brentford have this ability to cope with losing their best players. You think it was only a year ago, everybody was talking about, would Brentford get relegated in their second season without Christian Eriksen? And that didn't turn out too badly.
No. Let me ask you, the run, as I mentioned it, the ban runs up to and includes the 16th of Jan next year. Is that exclusive to English football? Can he head out on loan anywhere in Europe?
So from what I understand, if there was a situation where he was going to move abroad, he would have to get international clearance from the FA in order to do that. Now, look, it's an FA ban, so I think we can pretty confidently say the FA are not going to ban him in England and then suddenly say, oh, no, it's fine, you can go and play abroad. So I don't think that option is available to him. Obviously, these situations are quite rare, but if you remember, Kieran Trippier was banned for 10 weeks for telling some friends to bet on his move from Tottenham to Atletico Madrid a few years ago. And obviously, Trippier was playing in Spain for Atletico Madrid at the time, but that ban was upheld worldwide, even after Trippier appeal to FIFA for it. So I don't think there's any chance Tony suddenly magically appears playing abroad during this 8-month spell.
Jay, let me ask you this question. So he's been charged with the 262 breaches, and I said at the top of our chat we don't really know if the ban is long enough or too long because we don't know the breaches. So, for example, right, and I have no knowledge. I want to make that clear. For argument's sake, if he were to be found to have bet on himself to, for argument's sake, miss a penalty or get sent off or his team to lose, right? For argument's sake, that's completely different, in my opinion, to him betting on 2 games he has no interaction with whatsoever. So here's my question: will we ever find out what the breaches are? Will that information ever be released?
Yes. So Brentford themselves have put out a statement basically saying that they're not going to comment until the written reasons are published. And I think on the FA's statement on their website, they said that the written reasons will be published in due course. So I would like to think we'll know within the next week or so what those written reasons are, and that will kind of give us all a little bit more clarity, because you've got to remember, Tony had a personal hearing yesterday about this, and it's the independent regulatory commission who have then imposed the sanction and the 8-month ban, which have come out today. So I'm sure some of the evidence that Tony gave in this hearing yesterday will be involved in those written reasons, so we can understand what Tony actually did and understand how Tony, I guess, potentially tried to explain some of that behaviour.
Can he appeal it?
He can appeal it, but again, I think what's important to remember is that he was charged with 262 offences. He's admitted to 232 and they've withdrawn 30. Me personally, I don't know what Brentford's position is, but I feel like it's unlikely he's going to appeal, just because of the fact that he has admitted that he's done wrong in the first place. But that's not to say it won't happen. But again, we need to see what the written reasons are before we can really make a proper educated guess on that situation.
Later down the line, do you think it's going to affect his England career?
Yeah, of course. You know, we've seen how competitive places are, especially up front for England. You know, you remember it was quite a big thing when Ivan Toney wasn't included in England's squad for the World Cup. He was absolutely flying. He scored those 2 goals against Manchester City I mentioned earlier. You know, when he was included in the squad in March, I'm pretty certain Ollie Watkins didn't get in, and Watkins was on that crazy run of form. So for Toney to miss a 6-month period, well, not 6 month, an 8-month period in total, and such a large chunk, half of next season basically, other forwards will come into the mix. I'm not saying Southgate will forget about Toney, but he's not going to be able to see him. Then you've got the European Championships next summer. It's 6 months from January to June, enough time for Ivan Toney to firstly get back up to match sharpness, because Darren, I'm sure you'll say there's a big difference between training week in, week out and being match sharp, performing at the level that he's shown this season and performing well enough to then force his way back into Southgate's plans. It feels like a lot of things have to go in his favour from January onwards for that to happen.
If he's been suspended from all football and football-related activity, that is, in my head, kicking a ball, right? Can he train with the team? Can he train with anyone, the under-18? What does he do? How does he keep fit?
I think he'll basically have to get himself a personal trainer and maybe go to a local gym. He's not allowed to train with Brentford until September the 17th.
Is he not allowed to train at their training facilities?
I'm pretty certain he can't go anywhere near a training ground. Pretty certain he can't go near a football stadium. It's all football-related activity. So I guess it depends on what the FA define as football-related activity. I seem to recall someone was banned a few years ago, and I remember there were jokes flying around as to say, does that mean you're not allowed to play football in the back garden with your son or your daughter?